so quickly.
Is this related to Tony Shalhoub?
No. So what happened was,
I'm out.
As you know, USA Today has replaced a bunch of their journalists with just AI and having AI create articles. So with all of the press on this Nebraska IU game, AI created an article of the top. It was like the top 15 places.
It was what to do while you're in Bloomington, Indiana, including the top 3 restaurants to eat at while you're in town for the IU game.
Yeah. And so one of them was like Buffalo Wild Wings. One of them was...
They got so close. We literally have Buffalo's.
One of them Mother Bears was on there. But the third one was this place, or Chocolate Mousse was on there too. One of them was... this family-owned establishment that we all went to a ton when we were at IU called Shalubi's.
Shalubi's. Yeah, Shalubi's. Roll call.
So now, not only has this picked up steam and like people are calling out the USA Today being like, this business does not exist.
That's so funny.
People are now creating Instagram accounts for Shalubi's.
Oh, I love
Twitters. Someone bought the domain for shalubies.com.
Buddy, we would have had a field day with this if we were
and then Upstairs Brewing just said, hey everyone, in honor of the big game tomorrow, we're giving out free Dragonfly IPA at Shalubies. Be there or be square.
So according to the article, Shalubies is a great place to chill with friends and enjoy comforting food, but it's crazy. It's taken such a weird turn. Shalubi's has the wettest sandwiches in town.
Yeah.
People are telling every single person from Fox Sports and Barstool coming to town for the game they
to
have
go to
eat at Shalubi's.
Oh my God.
So like what's his name from the head of Barstool was like, where do I get dinner if I have to go to one restaurant? And everyone was just like, Shalubi's. Like, you
gotta do Shalubi's.
You gotta go and get the appetizer special at Shalubi's.
You gotta get the wet sandwich platter. The if I was Roy's, you better believe I'm hitting absolute stop on the t-shirt thing so I can sell so I can give out Shalubi's t-shirts.
I mean, yeah, I would 100% make like Shalubi's like towels or something like that and be like, yeah, come for.
What type of clientele do you think is Shalubi's? Is that like the Jewish sorority girls? Is it the jocks? Is it the theater kids?
Shalubi's definitely sounds like a place where, you know, you tell freshmen like, oh yeah, this is an established restaurant, and then they just all show up in their lanyards.
Oh, like when you're the new person as the line cook and they tell you to chop flour for 8 hours. If you're taking me to B-Town, there's no way I'm not going to Shalubi's.
I'm not going to B-Town if I'm not going to Shalubi's.
Hello, passengers, and welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License with service to the New World, otherwise known as Staten Island, New York. We ask that you please fasten your headphones, secure your podcasting device, and remember, for all of our familiars on board, you will find your master's coffin's plain side when the flight has landed.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Jeff Kurbis, joined by Rich Inman and Max Singer. How are you boys doing today?
Spooky.
Yeah, wait, hold on, guys. I'm having some technical difficulties. Could you vamp for a little?
Well, boys, this week we are continuing our theme of things that are a little bit spooky, things that are a little bit odd or, go in the night. And that is with What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show. Let me be very clear. We are not talking about the Taika Waititi movie mockumentary.
Let us be very clear in this podcast called TV Pilot's License that we are not covering a movie.
So before we dive too deep into What We Do in the Shadows, Max, do you mind telling folks what we do on this podcast?
Here at TV Pilot's License, we break down and analyze the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous shows. We learn a little bit more about how these shows came to be and were originally made, if they're effective pilot episodes and making us want to watch more, and if we think they can be made today. Go back and stream our old episodes from wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on YouTube and TikTok to see our smiling faces. And if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard.
Oh, YouTube and TikTok? Are you talking about cross promotion?
Oh my God. Rich, what's your question of the week?
All right, before they kick me off the podcast, let's get this underway. So obviously this, if there had to be one incredible shining light from this show, of which there are so many, I think my favorite actor on this show has to be Matt Berry, from just the increasingly insane pronunciations of how his character speaks. And if you're a fan of British TV or anything like that, you've known about Matt Berry for quite a long time. But as this is the first part, like his first foray into mainstream American audiences, if you're going to put Matt Berry in one show right now, what are you putting him in, and what's the cataclysmic result of that?
All right, so Rich, I'm just going to be honest with you. When you texted us your question, I misinterpreted what you said.
That's cool.
So I'm going to go with that answer because I think it is wild. So originally, what I interpreted from Rich's question when he texted us is, where would you want to see Laszlo in another TV show?
Okay.
And so then I was just like, if you're a fan of What We Do in the Shadows, you know that the way that Laszlo says New York City is one of the greatest things in the world.
That was maybe 2% correction. You gotta really sell it, Jeff.
I know.
New York City.
And Matt Berry is just so goddamn funny whenever he has to encompass the concept of New York. So what better show to put Laszlo in than Sex and the City and have him be one of Miranda's boyfriends on the show? Because unlike Carrie Bradshaw, where her boyfriends, there's some themes and stuff, Miranda just dated the weirdest fucking dudes all the time, and Laszlo would fit in perfectly in there, just talking about how much he loves New York City and all of that.
And as I sat there thinking about Miranda's undead boyfriend, I was wondering if I would find a love that would last forever.
Max, maybe you interpreted the question a little bit differently than I did. What's your answer?
Well, you've got me thinking about insane crossover potential now, because there is an arc in the very beginning of, I want to say, season 3 of Sex and the City, where Harry and the girls go to a political fundraiser event in Staten Island, and Harry starts a relationship for a couple of episodes with a candidate for mayor in New York City, played by John Slattery, which means that all of What We Do in the Shadows, because they are undead and have been around in New York since the 1860s, as established in this pilot episode today, they could all be at this political fundraiser with the girls and with John Slattery. I want you to think about that for a moment. I will wait. Also, kudos to American studios for finally understanding the power of Matthew Berry's vocal work and casting him as a sassy beaver in this year's The Wild Robot.
Beautiful.
Go see that movie if you haven't already. He's delightful as a sassy talking beaver. I guess I kind of just went with what would be the funniest thing to put this character in based on Matthew Berry's presentation, the way he inflects on things, the way he hits words. And I believe that we need to see magnets, Mr. White. Magnets, bitch. And I'm bringing in regular human meth dealer Matt Berry into the world of Breaking Bad.
There is no better way to blow your cover than having the most I don't know, luscious British voice in Albuquerque, New Mexico, selling meth.
I was about to say that
Albuquerque.
If you see him working at the fast food restaurant that they have in that series,
I see there's a New Mexico now.
I don't even care what the role is. He could be helping out Hank with the police. He could be a major drug kingpin, a la Gus Fring.
Oh yeah.
He could be an assistant to Walter White. He could just be the drama teacher at the high school from season 1. I really don't care. I just need to drop this man into Albuquerque and hear him hit those cues as pronounced as possible.
Well, I just want him as Jesse now that you queued it up this way.
Oh my God, we need that. We need it. Rich, what about you when you were concocting this question?
Somebody cooked here. 60 minutes.
Oh my God.
Let Matt Berry tell the news. That's all we want is his voice. We want his personality and everything. It is addictive. All I want is for him to talk about like nursing home abuse, but with his video, with his like insane voice. I hope that doesn't happen. But if there was one person to deliver the message.
Direct to camera. Dialysis.
Oh my gosh. Well, Rich, thank you so much for your question of the week. Let's talk a little bit more about what we do in the shadows. And we're going to start off with a quick synopsis, a look into the nightly lives of 4 vampires who have lived together on Staten Island for over a century. Nice, succinct, and I think does a good job of revealing what we're going to talk about without giving us too much about what we're going to talk about. But with that being said, Max, can you tell us a little bit more about how this show got made?
Today, we're talking about the pilot of What We Do in the Shadows, which originally aired on March 27th, 2019 on FX. We're talking about the show's creator, Jermaine Clement, a little bit. Remember a few minutes ago when Jeff said we weren't going to talk about the movie? Well, he fucking lied. A New Zealand-based multi-hyphenate, Clement gets his start in comedy while studying drama and film at Victoria University of Wellington. He forms the comedy troupe So You're a Man, which featured classmates Brent McKenzie, Clement's future Flight of the Conchords partner, and Taika Waititi, director of today's pilot. After graduation, Clement and Waititi form a duo called Humor Beasts, who go on to win the Billy T Award, New Zealand's highest comedy prize, and perform at Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Our show's origins begin back in 2005, with Clement and Waititi making the short film What We Do in the Shadows, Interviews with Some Vampires, a mockumentary on vampire roommates living in Wellington. With Waititi's first 2 feature films, Eagle vs. Shark and Boy, the latter of which was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance in 2010, the duo has the ability to expand upon their short with the help of some fundraising via Kickstarter, turning What We Do in the Shadows into a feature film released in 2014 with a premiere at Sundance. This is actually the second TV show spun off of the film. In 2016, Clement and Waititi debut Wellington Paranormal, a mockumentary series on Wellington police investigating the unexplainable based on characters from the original film Officer O'Leary and Officer Minogue. The duo was approached by FX in January 2018 to develop the film to series here in the United States, with production ordered a pilot with one caveat. Despite their increased fame in the US, the duo would not star in the show, although they maintain that it is the same universe as the original film.
Oh.
Needing someone to handle the reins of day-to-day showrunning, enter TVPL vet Paul Sibbs,
Woo.
a writer and consulting producer on Flight of the Conchords, best known for news radio and his recent work on Girls, Atlanta, and this year's English teacher.
My dog.
In May of 18, the show was greenlit with a 10-episode order. Clement wrote the episode solo due to scheduling conflicts with Waititi had working on Thor Ragnarok, although he does serve as today's pilot director.
That is...
Well,
I love them. Have you guys seen the movie?
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, God, it's so good. And I completely forgot that it is the same universe because Waititi and Clement show up as like members of the Vampiric Council, like New Zealand chapter or something like that. That is,
yeah.
Oh, God, I love it so much. I can't wait to get into this.
This show does a amazing job of building lore very quickly. And with that being said, let's talk about how we build lore instantly with the cold open of this show. We meet our Guillermo, right? We see Harvey Guillen, who like I absolutely adore as an actor, just to start, right?
Right.
And then to see him in this role of this innocent dope explaining the world of vampires to us, being our perspective as a non-vampire, I think is really, really brilliant, especially for folks who have no idea what We Do in the Shadows originally was. And I'm curious what you two thought of having our perspective, at least at first, being through this character.
I like that we get a relatable, non-supernatural element to kind of guide us into the show. We get a slightly more relatable POV, and we understand off the bat that A, this is going to be a mockumentary, and it's going to follow day to day. This is not going to be a thriller or necessarily high events each day. It's going to be the day-to-day life of vampires in the modern world. And every scene really early on sets this up. It lets you know tone, it lets you know kind of the game and the way the world works. And we get a very fun why is today different, or at least the maybe bait and switch why is today different, which is it is the eve of Guillermo's 10th anniversary, and he thinks he's finally going to become a vampire. And so I like that we're setting personal stakes right off the bat.
Oh, not stakes.
Right? Stakes. Bats.
Rich, what about yourself?
I mean, Guillermo immediately becomes it's great to like center him around all of this, because like it's so easy for it's like a really smart move by the writers of this show in general, because he's the only one that can really leave the house for an extended period of time too. So he's like their conduit to the outside world. And it definitely also sets up the fact that like how badly he wants to be a vampire, or that it is there is incentive. It is like it is exhilarating to have the thought of like becoming a vampire. That is what he's wanted for a really long time. And his throwback, or his essentially callback to Antonio Banderas in Interview with the Vampire is like it's so charming and so funny to me that that's like one of the reasons, like, you never think about what would inspire someone to want to be a vampire, and then here's the culture.
Can I just say I love that just vampire film and lore exists in this show as well,
right?
Because there's multiple callbacks to other famous vampire pieces of media, and they're all viewed, at least in this pilot, as inspirational. There's a reference to wanting to be covered in body glitter to be like Twilight later on, and I love that in a show about vampires they could view vampire representation in real life media as aspirational, and I like that the real world exists in the world of this show.
So, as a little sneak peek behind the scenes, behind the curtain for me, I watched this, and then instantly after, I've been watching a Halloween-themed or like spooky movie every night of October. I watched Interview with a Vampire right after this, and I love that movie. I've seen it multiple times, but I think it is so funny because it gave me even more appreciation for this pilot and some of the things that they do in this pilot that are different than it. And from like, it's just such a great, I highly recommend doing that if you end up watching this pilot, for those of our frequent flyers listening. But we have to talk about how I love the intro to this pilot, as far as like our literal, like, hey, here's the title card, here's the intro song. I think it is iconic, using the different like images of vampires throughout the ages and splicing our actors' faces onto them. In many instances, the art team for this show deserves all of the awards, because holy shit, some of the stuff that they did, Rich, I feel like you follow this, Max, I know you definitely follow this, but sports but art, that Twitter account is all I could think of when I was seeing some of these things, because I was like, someone from the art team was literally like, I know there's a portrait that we can use for this. I know there's a painting we can use. And then we have to do a little bit of photoshopping here. But doing that for an entire intro sequence, and then throughout this entire pilot, A+.
It's one of the most
it's so good,
impressive parts of the show. Like they do so much work in exposition, just telling past stories. Like, you know, when there's no cameras, there's nothing like, you know, no one's going out and filming like a flashback scene to like, you know, 1643 or whatever. It's all done through these like historical paintings. I don't know if all of them are real, or any of them made specifically for this. Like I truly can't tell.
But whatever it is, whether it's something that just feels alike, I mean, my guess is that you're a major studio, you could bring on people who can do that style of artwork, or you can create it. I even love in the intro sequence the 1970s and 80s photos. It's really fun to see proper English gentleman Laszlo as a New York City, like CBGB, Maxwell's Kansas City punk, and just to show the lives they lead at the end of the day, these are people who adapt with the times. They follow trends. There's not this weird immortality. I'm always stuck in this one era, or maybe Nandor a little bit more so. But to show that they evolve, they adapt, they're trying to be human in a world that they're never going to quite fit in. And that's a really fun game because it means that they're always going to be trying to connect in some way. And there's just infinite fodder with that.
What did y'all think of, after our intro sequence, how we get to meet all of our vampires, right? I find it really interesting as opposed to finding out as the show goes on. I think that they did a great job of being like, hey, you're going to need to be bought in on this cast of characters.
Yes.
So we're going to do this like roommate meeting sequence to then introduce, hey, this is how X became a vampire, Y became a vampire, Z became a vampire, and also here's Colin Robinson. Like, I think it's a great tool, but I want to hear from y'all. We've watched so much TV. It seems a little bit different than what we normally see.
Yeah, I think getting to see their origin stories of Nandor, like explaining why he was called Nandor the Relentless, but in a way that where he was kind of talking like a kindergarten teacher, where he's like, no, you will also be pillaged. That is for everyone. That is like, it's so funny how cutesy he talks. And then I completely forgot that Laszlo is a vampire because of Nadia. Like I completely forgot that that's like part of their arc, in addition to them being like lovers for 300 years or whatever. But yeah, I really do love the way that they do exposition with this. They're getting a lot of the character wants. They're getting a lot of character, like some of the game of each of them out of the way first. It is like, it's kind of written like a long sketch almost, where it's like, all right, here's the world we're living in. You can't go outside, but Colin can. And God, the intro for Colin, I think this is one of like the most like funny thought out characters on TV ever. I think this is so Flight of the Conchords. It's so Taika Waititi. It is like to have one person in an office be a legitimate vampire, but he just like harnesses energy by boring you to death. It is amazing.
So in an interview that I found with Mark Proksch, who plays Colin Robinson, he describes the show as being pitched to him and described on set as friends with fangs. And I think that's such an important distinction, in that this is a slice of life classic sitcom first, and then it's supernatural second. And the fact that we've discussed so many shows on this podcast where it's like, how do we get everyone in a room? What's the inciting incident that gathers everyone together, that gets our main ensemble together? And usually it's pretty intense. It's a pretty big deal of why is today different. And today it is the needing of a roommate meeting in the library. And it's like, we've all been there. We have not all been vampires,
right?
But we have all lived with roommates at some points in our life, and we've needed to have the roommate sit down. We've needed to discuss something, and it sucks. It's not fun to do. It's so boring, and we make that the kickoff, and we just drag it out to comical lengths. It takes us so long to get to this letter. It is so funny how long we draw out.
It's like an entire
first act. Yeah. It's almost the entire first act to get to the reading of a letter that arrived, something that is so simple.
So and they're like, oh, he's arriving tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it is such a clever thing to treat this, Max, as you said, as like, this is a story about roommates first and foremost, and the hijinks that they get into along the way, because it's a lot more relatable than like, hey, this is a story about vampires, y'all, and like, you've all been vampires before. Don't you hate it when you only half finish a corpse worth of blood and then you don't know what to do with the second half?
Oh God!
But
that half drunk joke. No, where'd they find the alcohol? No, they're half drunk.
Well, there's that, and there's a Matt Berry Laszlo line when talking about being turned into a vampire by Nadia, where he says that he heard clawing at the window, and I thought, who was that? Because I live on the third floor, and it's such a stray observation. It's something that is so obviously simple, but it's played to excellent comic effect. And I just think the overall lesson of this is, if you're going to do a weird world game, if you're going to exist with the paranormal, you need to have your base really grounded. And I think what we can all walk away from is, this is a show about middle-aged roommates in Staten Island. And then you get to layer and map all of the vampire stuff on top of it. But you know what that main thing is, and you can always go back to that thing. If you ever need a joke, if you ever need to get back to your plot, you could always go back to, they are just roommates in Staten Island.
And I think one of the things that puts this show apart from a lot of other shows that we've done is the editing and the timing of jokes is really top notch, right? Like, I go back to we find out about the Baron, right? And then we hear about the sexual exploits and affair of Nadia, right? And we're like, oh, like that's funny.
How am I going to tell Laszlo?
And then literally a second later, he's like, Laszlo's like, oh yeah, I had a secret affair with the Baron.
Same phrasing.
It's literally, it's just so well done of like, yeah, that joke could be like really like, that was fine. I'm cackling at that. Not to mention, like, another instance of the timing was when Laszlo and Nadia are walking in the park to hunt for food. And we have that split second between them getting the guy and the blood falling on the person's partner, where I'm just like, it's so well done. It's one of the gigantic benefits you have of having someone like Taika Waititi, like, do this show and do this pilot as a director, because you're going to get that timing, you're going to get those jokes, and they're going to hit really, really hard and have you bought in from the start.
Matt Berry is such a surgeon with how he speaks too. There was like in the point that or in the line that you were just mentioning, Max, there was like, it was like, and then I found out that the woman that I shared my bed with last night was had drained all my blood, and I woke a creature of the dam for all eternity, which had been revealed to me later. It was like every little bit is like, I don't even know if you can even write for Matt Berry. There's just like something he's going to add with either his intonation or his or just like the way he speaks. That's going to, or I'm sorry, the word choice he uses to like get extra laughs in there. Absolutely incredible.
So let's move forward a little bit with this pilot, because it's not only about what's happening inside of the house, although that is a lot of what we're seeing. It's also what's happening out in the real world, seeing these vampires try to live their lives without knowledge of technology or knowledge of what's happening in the grocery store. Like that single image of watching Nandor walk in the grocery store with his cape was fantastic. I absolutely loved it, because it's just this very cinematic look, and then it's like, oh, I need crepe paper,
right?
And it's just like, it's stuff like that I'm just so amazed with, because it's a different type of storytelling of like, how do we get weirdos to be comedy?
Yeah,
and let's embrace that fully.
Nandor's character specifically has such a nice way of being like very childish in addition to extremely powerful. There's that one moment where Guillermo's holding up a skeleton, like a paper skeleton, and he goes over and he just looks at it. He's like, no, I don't think we want that, and then lights it on fire from afar. It's like, that's such a small, petty use of your power. It's so funny to watch them just use it in like small, tiny individual ways to not get noticed, when they're capable of like lifting massive amounts, like moving faster than like human recognition, and like draining an entire human being of blood in mere seconds.
I think what a lot of this cast does so well is, as actors, they use so many fun tools in their tool belt to play comedy. The actor who plays Nandor, his name's Kayvan Novak. He's a British classically trained actor. He came up actually with a great movie called Four Lions that was written by Jesse Armstrong and co-starred him and Riz Ahmed as like bumbling wannabe terrorists trying to do an attack. Jesse Armstrong from Succession does a lot of dark humor, very funny. But he uses his size in this. He uses his face in this. He uses speech patterns. And there's just so many tools as an actor that everyone utilizes to such great comic effect. And it's fun to see all of them played in different ways. It's just a really fun way to play contemporary sitcom humor.
So we could talk all day about some of these side quests that we see. But there's one in particular that I do have to bring up. And that is, vampires, they need blood. They need food sources. We do see a hunt in one instance. But we also see how our familiar lures some of our folks into the home. And my face when I realized that I forgot Beanie Feldstein was in this pilot out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
And then the LARPing side quest of how dedicated these people are. It's just such a great joke that, like, that could be an entire episode for some shows that we talk about. This was just one small, like, maybe 3 minutes total of screen time of our episode. And it just,
and she's in a couple more throughout the season, but I think this is like right before she kind of blew up with Booksmart, right?
It is 2 weeks after Booksmart premiered at South by Southwest.
That's crazy.
And I think her biggest thing to date at this point was Neighbors 2, Sorority Rising. But you have someone who is on the cusp of having their breakout be seen by everyone, and they're getting these raves out of South by. And then 2 weeks later, your pilot has this person whose name is on the lips of people who are like in the comedy sphere.
Right.
And you let her just be an accessory player to this amazing ensemble, and it just boosts it that much more. I don't know. It's just like, it's very like serendipitous in that way that you're able to get someone like that, like just at the moment where they're really blowing up.
So let's talk a little bit about how this pilot ends, because we do meet the Baron, right? Played by Doug Jones, which I was just like, Doug Jones, you put makeup on that man and he transforms into that character fully. And I loved the character of the Baron just being this, that is what a lot of people think of vampires, but like so funny and dry at the same time.
There's a moment when we first meet the Baron where there's a familiar to Laszlo and Nadia named June, who's this old woman. And I'm watching this pilot back and I'm thinking, is this like a Golden Girls thing where there's like a housekeeper that we never see again in this show?
Kinda.
Like a character that, like, after getting the pilot done and getting test screenings, like, actually, we don't need this other familiar. We have Guillermo, we have Gizmo. And then there's just the most bloodlusty murder scene that we get in this episode. And I was like, oh no, that's why I don't remember seeing this character again. It is not a studio notes thing.
She got drank like a Capri Sun in front of everyone. She got cracked open and slammed.
Baron got the straw in on the first try.
Yeah.
Like that's impressive stuff.
I really do love the Baron's reveal, because they number one, it is like, if they're going for the, like, they're finding the comedy and the banalities of life and finding like that moment, it is awkward when he's there. It is awkward the way he talks to them. It's awkward the way he gets like spoken to back. Like, they're supposed to have this like great reverence for them, but they kind of don't. And it essentially, this like felt like The Office, but very much, I don't know. But Baron also does like a really cool thing here, and he acknowledges the camera crew filming, which is like the first fourth wall break you get aside from the testimonials and everything. But it's just like, oh yeah, it's weird that this camera crew is just like surrounding vampires who are supposed to live in secrecy.
You mentioned the awkwardness of the Baron being there. That kind of, we're supposed to have reverence, but we don't know what to talk about. We were struggling to make small talk. And again, that just plays into, what is this show? It's about 4 people in Staten Island. It's really awkward when an old friend or an old family member who you haven't spoken to in a long time just kind of tells you, hey, I'm going to be in town tomorrow and I'm staying at your place. That's an uncomfortable situation. And it's a thing that we can all relate to. And then when we overlap it with the supernatural, we play it to heightened effect. everything this show does is just simple scenarios with like outstanding circumstances layered on top of it.
So let's talk about the idea of the ending of this pilot, right? Like, Max, you sort of brought it up. We are set up to initially think, why is this night different than any other night? It is because we're going to see a familiar get turned into a vampire, potentially because it's the 10th anniversary. I love the awkwardness of this exchange, of this gift. Like, I think it is such a great way of being like, hey, this is something you're going to have to wait for to see a familiar, because then we lose your point of contact. We lose the person that the audience can see themselves through. And I've used gigantic quotation marks, in a world amongst vampires. And what did you guys?
But don't hold
think
up a mirror.
This?
Don't do that.
What do you all think of this being the end to our pilot, or the end of this first episode and instance with our 4 vampire roommates?
I love it. I love that we pull the rug out from this first character who we meet. I love that we play with power dynamics in a few ways too. And like, both characters in a way play it like they have the upper hand, which is really interesting, because you get Nandor in the way he views Guillermo, which is not remembering how long he's worked for him, saying it's a 2-year anniversary when it's really his 10th.
Yeah.
You know, giving him this gift that is meaningful to him, but is clearly not worth the value of Guillermo. And he thinks that he has the higher power. He thinks that Guillermo is indebted to him. And then we get a reveal at the very end where, after Nandor's gone to bed, Guillermo just cracks the curtain a tiny little bit and lets the daylight into the room and hits the coffin. Not in a way that's going to damage it, but it lets the audience know that actually Guillermo is the one who keeps things running here. Guillermo is actually the one with power, and it's important to let Nandor think that he is high status, but at the end of the day, he is not the one who holds the cards. It is the assistant who keeps this place running. Again, one final example of it's the lower status character who's actually the one who's keeping things moving, keeping things afloat, something that we can all relate to in life.
Definitely. It felt like a nuclear war, like chess game, basically, of just like, can't upset Nandor, he'll eat you. All right, can't upset Guillermo, he will fry you in your sleep. Like, it's so interesting to watch that. I mean, you know, in hindsight too, because we've all seen basically every episode, I assume, between the 3 of us. It's so interesting how much they have to keep playing on that. Like, it's like, that is the tie that like keeps the whole show running too. And I do really love that throughout all of this, at any given moment, any of these characters, it could be said that the pilot revolves around them. It is so good how they all are like uniquely doing their own thing. We didn't even touch on Nandor. I'm sorry, on Nadia finding like a long lost lover in this dude named Jeff Suckler.
And Jeff, what a terrible name.
You know what? Jeff with the J is the worst version of a name I could ever think of.
Yeah, but you have to look on the IMDb credits to know it's a J.
Or you can have the closed captions on the screen like I do, because I'm an old man.
When have closed captionings ever spelled it with a G?
When we tell them to.
Well, let's talk a little bit about things that we loved about this pilot. I do want to give credit to that entire side quest of the concept of Gregor, right? And like, I think that is such a great use of, hey, here is something that we're going to explore throughout this season, most likely.
Past lives element.
Yeah, give us the idea that like, hey, these characters, like the exposition we gave you is not all of them. We're talking about 200, 300, 400-year-old vampires in this instance. There's going to be a lot of history. And I love that it's like, after just watching Interview with the Vampire, like, they don't really give much of like, what happened before? What happened with some of these guys? Like, this is like, we're going to tell you everything, like the good times, the bad times, give you the lore, what's up with the Baron. I think it's such a great thing of like, oh, here's a little piece. Come back for the next episode. Let's learn a little bit more. I'm curious from you two, what were some things that you loved about this pilot?
I love the 1-2 punch on jokes of Staten Island regarding the Baron and our main ensemble. How we ended up here. The boat dropped us off here. There's no rhyme or reason for why this show takes place specifically in Staten Island, and I like that it's the funniest place that we could set this up. And then the Baron asking if Staten Island is the seat of power in the new world. Listen, we all know the jokes about Staten Island. We all know what it is as a punchline to New York. It's just such a fun extra set of circumstances to add to this show. And it also lets us know the kind of people and the stereotypes we're going to see them interact with. It's such a fun little crumb to toss in there, and to have it be as meaningless in reality as it's where the boat dropped us off is just such a fun way to play it and to add it in.
It's beautiful.
Well, we'll have some more thoughts on that in our in-flight question. Rich, what about you? Things that you loved about this pilot?
We touched on it a bit. The gameplay that the writers use to just leave so many possibilities open with these characters and how they interact. It's like they drew up a short maze on the box on a box of cereal, where all these characters can find each other, where conflict's going to be. They do such a great job of leaving the door open for so many different storylines with just small games that are just asides in the script. And it is, I don't know, it's just it feels very masterfully done. You could take any comedy writer in LA and they could make a spec from this because of just everything that they've established with these with the games, with the rules for each character.
So I'm going to ask, because we do this on every podcast, but are there any wait a minute moments for you about this pilot? Things that caused you pause with this pilot?
Hey, yeah, why do 3 people with the ability to fly need a Stairmaster in their attic?
That's very good. That's very good.
That's a great question. Rich, what about yourself?
For me, this pilot feels like they did it on a pretty insane budget, which I think that they did. But they really figured out the lighting later on when they got picked up for the full season, because it is the lighting for this is just not doing them a lot of favors inside this house. But yeah, that's really all I got. I mean, the wait a minute moment was that they didn't have a commitment of a lot of money yet.
So my wait a minute moment was not about this pilot. It's about an in-flight question we received, because I think it was targeted at me. The in-flight question came from frequent flyer Lauren, who said, "Who is the energy vampire among the 3 of you?" I don't want to be bullied on my own podcast, no. Lauren.
Oh,
Don't you dare try to bully me on my podcast, because guess what? I know. I'm aware. I'm a fully aware energy vampire at times.
Jeff just has a lot of interest, Lauren. Just let it go.
But with that said, we do have one more question. We got a ton of in-flight questions for this, so thank you so much to our frequent flyers.
Thanks,
and those of you who are new to the podcast, we'll talk a little bit about how to submit those later in the show. But our in-flight question this week came from Michelle in Chicago. And Michelle simply asked, "The Baron is very disappointed that..." excuse me, I'm going to re-record that. Mm-hmm. "The Baron is very disappointed that they have not conquered Staten Island. In the TV pilot's licensed universe, what municipality would your vampire dynasty take over?" So, Rich, Max, you're sent over, probably from Europe, on a boat. Where are you taking over for your vampire dynasty?
West Hollywood, California. I want to see vampires take over the neighborhood. I just want to see it. I think it would be very fun. They're all they're all clearly ambiguously sexual anyways. It is I think it would fit in really well. I feel like there's also an episode later in the show where they do go to a gay bar, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I'd vamps in West Hollywood, hands down.
What about you, Max?
I was trying to think about this one because we've seen vampires in the Pacific Northwest in popular media. We've seen them in the American South and in the Bayou. To say anything spooky in Salem, Massachusetts is an absolute cop out entirely. And so I wanted to go with a place that is so oddly specific in its architecture, a place that welcomes so much unique styles of architecture, and that is Columbus, Indiana, a town that is famous for basically just having every major architect and designer of the 20th century build spec homes. And it is just a small town in South Central Indiana that has photography books of it and all of this rich architectural history. And I think that the vampires would find so much joy in these styles of architecture. They could just build Gothic architecture in Columbus and no one would be any the wiser. They could drop homes that felt so reminiscent of the times they grew up in Europe and no one would seem to care. And if it goes off, if you're off the grid there, you'll never be noticed. They could live in their spooky, weird homes and no one would bother them.
Oh my God.
So I was thinking about this, and specifically I was thinking about our cast of 4 vampire roommates and where I'd like to see them land instead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I came up very much with the Poconos, and I'm just picturing them at like the Jewish family camp from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and like God. That's what they do all year. That's where they live. They do exercise on the lake at night. They're complaining about the kosher Jews that they have to eat, and like that's it.
Oh no!
And for a long time in the 20th century, the Poconos was America's honeymoon capital. And if we're talking about conservative values, if you get there just in time, you could probably find a lot of virgins.
Well, thank you so much for that in-flight question. We'll talk a little bit more about how to submit those at the end of the episode. But let's talk a little bit about the history of this show. This show currently has 5 seasons, 50 episodes, but we are on the precipice of the 6th and final season coming out and 11 episodes to go with it. As far as viewership for the show, super interesting in that I was not only able to get viewership from the first season of like actual people who watched on TV, but also people who watched through streaming sources as well and DVR. And what's really interesting is because the show's on FX, cable, we're talking about like maybe 400, 500,000 people watching it when it's on TV. That number triples just from DVR viewers. Wow. And then you add in people who are watching on things like Hulu or Disney Plus, whatever you want to call it. Like this number just expands and expands and expands as you introduce more of these things. So it goes to show that, sure, you can use Nielsen ratings to say how successful something is, but this is something that when people found out that we were doing this, I got a lot of messages being like, finally, because just it hits a lot of chords for a lot of people. Let's talk about awards. 89 nominations and 14 wins, including some creative Emmy awards. I do want to note that this show has 29 nominations for Primetime Emmy Awards. The big issue is because it is classified as a comedy, it has to go against everything else that is classified as a comedy like that isn't a comedy. Exactly. And this is my plea. For fuck's sake, come up with a new category for non-comedies. Please, I beg of you. It's
only
just too much.
There was a word to highlight shows with dramatic elements.
We'll never find out what it is.
We'll never know. I'd love for it to be a nice 5-letter word, but who knows? But that's the history of this show. It goes out on its own terms with one final season, and we wanted to celebrate that by having this episode out there. But now it is time for Rich's Game of the Week.
We here at Rich's Game of the Week, thank you for joining us this week. I believe we've already done some games that are about vampires in general because we did like True Blood and Vampire Diaries already. So I wanted to talk a little bit about trivia for movies that became TV shows. That is like apparently an extremely common thing that happens, and The gold rush for IP has never been stronger. But here, first question for you. This future hit TV show started as a dark comedy starring Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould, and a future cast member of the show playing a different role. Was this movie A, All in the Family, B, Chips, C, Taxi, D, MASH?
That's going to be... Is it
MASH, right?
What'd you say, Max?
I was going to say, is Sutherland in MASH too?
Yeah, I think he is.
I actually did not know MASH was a movie before it became a TV show, but Sutherland does play Hawkeye, and Ellen Alda is in it, but it is a different character. Number 2, which of these comedy classics did not turn into a doomed TV show pilot? A, Uncle Buck, B, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, C, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, D, 9 to 5.
C, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah, I was about to say.
You guys have heard all of those as TV shows? All the other
Yeah.
ones? Really? I literally never... Did they actually make it to air?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off definitely did, because I've watched that pilot.
Uncle Buck definitely did.
Whoa. Okay, wow. All right, yes, it was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And then this HBO hit actually started as a B movie that almost no one saw. Is it A, The Sopranos, B, Westworld, C, 6 Feet Under, D, The Wire?
It's Westworld.
Have you seen the Westworld B movie?
It's nuts. And when I say that, it's like, it's wild what that movie, like someone saw that movie and was like, I have a TV show and it's going to be even better. And yeah,
it was.
first 2 seasons of Westworld are amazing television.
Wow. I don't understand how it's connected to the animated Jerry Seinfeld film B movie, but I'm trusting you, Jeff.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for your game of the week. Before our flight comes to a land, I have 2 questions for each of you gentlemen. And the first is, based off of the pilot, do you want to learn more about these 4 vampire roommates and what they're going to be doing, what sort of debauchery or hijinks they're going to be falling into every night, or at least for 6 seasons of television? And then second, this show is getting another season. It's a final season. And I think it is one of those things where we're seeing more and more TV just be on streaming services, as opposed to like FX now just shows movies a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. That's basically all that's on that channel. Does FX clog up its schedule with more TV, or, show Spider-Man 3 for the 40th time in a day? What are your thoughts, you two?
Put the Spider-Man 3 down.
Oh my God.
No one wants to see Spider-Man 3 anymore. That's why there's a third one. This is 100% yes, I need to see this. I need to see more of the show. It was when I saw the pilot for the first time. It still continues to be today, and it's crazy how good it still feels, even after having watched how batshit nuts that the the show gets. And then personally, I think it's boring when streamers just become stars. Like the Stars Network, it's just like, we can see movies on other streaming channels. Or just come up with some original stuff. Like, this guy has now moved on to English Teacher, which is fantastic. Put more stock into lifting up shows like that.
English Teacher, if you listen to this podcast frequently, you'll know it's Rich's favorite family-focused TV show.
Yeah.
It's for the entire family. If you like Saved by the Bell and Boy Meets World, you're going to love English Teacher.
That's right.
Yeah, we were literally talking and we were like, what's a family-friendly show? And Rich was just like, the English Teacher makes perfect sense for this.
That's right. It's it's Abbott Elementary, but more wholesome.
Max, what about yourself?
Yes, this is a definite I will keep watching. This harkens back to a concept that I think I brought up when we talked about Eastbound and Down, which is it makes me miss broad character-driven comedy on TV as we shift into this world of realism and auteurs playing sort of fictionalized versions based on their own lives. Those have times and places, and there are great examples of it. But I just love seeing broad actual character portrayals on TV and letting great actors sink their teeth, pun intended, into these roles. And I will always step up to see more of that on TV. Yes, I do think that there needs to be a place for this. FX has proven to be so successful with their TV development, as much as they try to fight it with doing things like FX on Hulu all at once drops for some shows versus weekly standard releases for others, and doing some things on FX and some on FXX, which you need a different cable package for. I don't understand how any of that works, but you're good at what you do and you have the Disney money, and I want you to keep doing fun, original things. I will also give a plea to the TV Academy. If there has ever been a show that's been more worthy of the Schitt's Creek treatment of in its final season, getting this sort of redemptive arc and overdue Emmy Award nomination and love, let it be Shadows. In its second year, it was able to get nominated for Best Comedy Series and got 3 different nominations for Outstanding Writing. It's been getting there every year. It finally got an acting nomination from Matt Berry this year, and let it break through. Let it get the love it deserves. You're little by little giving it more nominations. Let it break through. Let it get writing love. Let it get directing love. Let it get comedy series. You will make so many people happy, and it'll show that broad, character-driven work still has a place in this version of comedy that feels so self-referential and so just playing versions of themselves.
And after Max so eloquently said that, I'll just be short and sweet. Yeah, I'm watching more of this show. This show fucking slaps. This show is so well done.
2 hands up for Jeff.
Yeah, like 2 thumbs, and also other fingers. But in this instance, I also want to give, like, I think that this show really shows that sometimes you really need to let people who are creatives just own things and let them have their TV shows. Yep. I'm not speaking to a specific CEO of a network, but I am saying that Taika Waititi is really good at his job. And
he also
when
has
you
to
let
want to
him
do it with, he also has to want to do TV. That's another
and
thing.
when he likes doing something and you let him do the thing he likes, it turns out to be really profitable because you get eyes on your network and you get streamers and subscribers. And then people get really upset when you cancel said things. Not speaking about anything in particular in this instance. As far as
there's
FX,
no pirate show that we could possibly be talking about.
Yeah, there's nothing that we could be possibly talking about. Yo ho, yo ho. But as far as FX goes, like, yeah, keep it, let it be your playground for dark, for things that are a little bit not Disney brand. Because if you're just going to turn it into the channel where you show movies, guess what? There's way too many of those out there. And I think that you need to let FX be the place where you take a chance.
But their slogan is literally FX has the movie show.
Well, that is our flight, gentlemen, and our plane has come to a land. But before we go, I want to make sure that folks can find you if they want to have a little bit more. So, Rich, where can folks find you?
It's nightfall, and you can find me on Instagram at Damn That's Rich. You can find original sketch comedy from myself and Max at Dadwagon Comedy on TikTok.
Max, what about yourself?
That you can find me on all things social media at MaxwellSig.
And if you're looking for me, you can probably find me just walking around in the park. Don't worry about what I'm doing. No, your partner hasn't gone missing. They were always missing. But if you're looking for me on social media, you can find me at Run Jeff Run. If you're looking for the TV Pilot's License, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as watch our smiling faces on YouTube. You can also find us on social media at TV Pilot's License. If you have a question for the show, or maybe for our next episode, a suggestion of a show you want to hear, shoot us an email at tvpilotslicense@gmail.com, or give us a call at 213-290-1713, or you can shoot us an in-flight question at tvpilotslicense.com. Make sure to watch out for sneak previews of some of the shows and episodes that we got coming up. But with the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then,
rate and review the podcast.
Oh my god.